I had already won at life. A successful career, a beautiful home, a wife I trusted with everything, including my will. She was set to inherit my entire fortune. What I didn't know was that she planned to inherit it by killing me. At first, it looked like love, concern, care. Rest more. Take this. Drink that. Then one night, I collapsed. Doctors said I shouldn't have survived. And that's when the truth started to surface. Messages, plans, insurance changes, all pointing to one horrifying fact. The person sleeping next to me wasn't protecting me. She was waiting for me to die. But I didn't. And surviving didn't just save my life, it exposed everything. Stay with me, because what I learned about trust, money, and marriage might save yours. For most of my adult life, I believed I had done everything right. I wasn't born wealthy. Nothing was handed to me. Every dollar I earned came from years of risk, long nights, missed weekends, and decisions that kept me awake staring at the ceiling. I built my business slowly, painfully, one contract at a time. There were moments I thought I'd lose everything, moments when quitting felt easier than continuing. But I didn't quit. And eventually, it worked. By the time this story begins, I was financially secure in a way I once thought was impossible. No debt, investments growing quietly in the background, a home that felt permanent, a future that felt settled. And standing beside me through all of it was my wife. We met before the money, before the comfort, before success had softened the sharp edges of my life. She knew the version of me that worried about rent, that counted coins, that doubted himself. She celebrated my wins and steadied me through losses, or at least that's what I believed. From the outside, our marriage looked solid. Friends used words like lucky, balanced, goals. We didn't fight loudly. We didn't air our problems. We hosted dinners, traveled occasionally, planned for the future like people who assumed they had plenty of time. I trusted her completely. So completely that when the topic of estate planning came up, it didn't feel heavy or uncomfortable. It felt responsible, normal, something grown-ups do when life finally feels stable. I remember sitting across from a financial advisor, listening as he explained contingencies and documents and worst-case scenarios. Death, disability. The words floated past me without weight. Those things happen to other people, not to someone like me, not now. When he asked who the beneficiary should be, I didn't hesitate. My wife, I said. Sole beneficiary, full control, no complications. I remember glancing at her when the papers were signed. She smiled, a soft, supportive smile, and squeezed my hand under the table. In that moment, I felt proud. Proud of what I'd built. Proud of the trust between us. Proud that if something ever happened to me, she would be taken care of. That thought brought me peace.
At home, life moved easily. Mornings were quiet, evenings predictable. We talked about renovations, vacations, maybe slowing down one day. She encouraged me to rest more, to enjoy what I'd earned, told me I worked too hard, told me I deserved comfort. I believed her. Looking back now, I can see how calm can be mistaken for safe. Because nothing felt wrong. There were no screaming arguments, no obvious betrayals, no dramatic shifts that would have triggered alarm. If anything, she seemed more attentive than ever, more concerned with my health, more interested in what I ate, how I slept, whether I was stressed. At the time, it felt like love maturing. Now I understand how easily trust can become a blindfold. I truly believed I had reached the finish line of life. Success, stability, partnership. I thought the hard part was over, that whatever challenges remained would be small, manageable, shared. I had money in the bank, a wife I trusted, a future I didn't question. I believed I had won. That belief made me careless. Because when you think you're safe, you stop looking for danger. When you think someone loves you, you don't imagine they could be capable of harming you. And when everything feels peaceful, you assume it's because it truly is.
I didn't know I was living inside someone else's plan. I didn't know that the documents I signed so confidently would become motivation. I didn't know that the calm I enjoyed was part of a setup. I didn't know that the person who slept beside me every night had already imagined a future without me in it. And I had no idea that the person I trusted most had already planned my death. At first, nothing felt suspicious. That's the part that still haunts me. How normal it all seemed. My wife didn't suddenly turn cold or distant. She didn't become cruel or careless. If anything, she became more attentive, more involved, more present. I told myself that was love. She started asking questions she'd never asked before. Casual ones, at least on the surface. Do you remember where you keep the insurance documents? Did the lawyer ever send copies of the will? What happens if something happens to you suddenly? She'd laugh after asking, wave it off. I just like being prepared, she'd say. You know how anxious I get. And I believed her. I told myself this was what responsible couples talked about, that planning for the worst didn't mean expecting it, that love sometimes sounds like paperwork. Then there were the phone calls. She used to talk openly, pacing the living room, laughing, complaining about small things, but gradually the calls moved outside, or into the bathroom, or ended the moment I entered the room. When I asked who it was, she always had an answer. Work, my sister, nothing important. Her phone was suddenly always face down. Still, I didn't push. I told myself everyone deserves privacy, that marriage isn't ownership, that suspicion is how trust dies. Then came the concern for my health. You've been exhausted lately, she'd say. You should slow down. You don't need to prove anything anymore. She encouraged me to drink more wine at night to relax. She handed me vitamins, supplements, sometimes medication she said the doctor recommended. If I hesitated, she insisted gently. It's for your heart, she'd say, for your stress. She made it sound loving, protective. I remember one evening in particular. I had just finished a long week, mentally drained. She poured me a drink before I even sat down.
Tonight you rest, she said. Let me take care of you. That should have been comforting. Instead, there was a brief flicker of something I couldn't name. But I ignored it, because every sign had an explanation, and explanations are comforting when you don't want the truth. I told myself the questions about the will were practical. The phone calls were harmless. The concern for my health was affection. And every time a thought crossed my mind that didn't fit that story, I pushed it away. I even felt guilty for noticing. What kind of man doubts his wife when she's being kind? What kind of husband questions love just because it feels focused? Looking back, I see the pattern clearly. The timing, the escalation, the way her interest aligned perfectly with my financial security. But at the time, I saw pieces, never the whole picture. That's how danger survives, not through chaos, but through plausibility. Friends would comment, "She really takes care of you." I'd smile proudly. "Yeah, I'm lucky." Lucky. That word tastes bitter now. The truth is, I didn't miss the signs because they weren't there. I missed them because accepting them would have shattered everything I believed about my life. So I chose comfort over curiosity, trust over verification, love over logic. Until the night the patterns stopped being subtle. Until the night my body betrayed me. I remember going to bed feeling heavier than usual. My limbs felt slow, my thoughts foggy. I assumed it was exhaustion, stress catching up to me. The last thing I remember clearly was her voice. "Drink this," she said softly. "You'll sleep better." I did, and then everything went dark. No dreams, no warning, no gradual fade, just absence. Then, one night, something went wrong, and I didn't wake up the same. The first thing I felt was heat. Not warmth, heat. Like my blood had been set on fire. My chest tightened so suddenly I thought I was having a heart attack. My vision blurred, the room tilting sideways as if gravity had lost interest in me. I tried to sit up, to call out her name, but my body didn't respond. That's the terrifying part no one talks about. When your mind is awake, but your body has already decided to shut down. I remember falling out of bed, or maybe I slid. I'm not sure. The floor felt impossibly far away. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the bedroom door opening, and her silhouette standing there. I woke up to chaos. Bright lights, alarms, voices overlapping in sharp, urgent bursts. Someone was shouting numbers. Another voice said my name loudly, repeatedly, like they were trying to pull me back from somewhere deep and dark. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even open my eyes. Later, I learned my heart rate had dropped dangerously low. My blood pressure had collapsed. I wasn't breathing properly when the paramedics arrived. If they'd been 5 minutes later... The doctor didn't finish that sentence. He didn't need to. I spent 2 days in the ICU. Tubes everywhere, machines breathing for me, monitoring every beat of a heart that had nearly given up. When I finally woke up fully, the room was quiet. Too quiet. A doctor sat beside my bed, holding a clipboard with a seriousness that made my stomach sink. "You're very lucky," he said. I tried to joke. My voice came out weak. "I don't feel lucky." He didn't smile. "You shouldn't be alive." That's not something you expect to hear when you open your eyes. He explained slowly, carefully. My system had been flooded with a combination of substances, sedatives mixed with medication that shouldn't have been taken together. The levels in my blood were far beyond anything accidental. "This wasn't a reaction," he said. "This wasn't a dosage error. This was intentional." I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up. Intentional? By who? An accident I could understand, a mistake, a mix-up, even negligence. But intention? The police came later that day. 2 of them, calm, professional, asking questions that suddenly felt heavy. What did you eat? What did you drink? Who prepared it? Who was with you? I answered honestly. My wife, my home, my bed. They didn't accuse her, not yet, but I could see it in their eyes, the shift, the calculation. This wasn't just a medical emergency anymore. It was a crime scene. They told me something else that made my chest tighten all over again. If my body hadn't reacted the way it did, if I hadn't collapsed when I did, if the paramedics hadn't been dispatched as quickly as they were, I would have died quietly in my sleep. No struggle, no signs of violence, just a tragic, sudden passing, natural causes. I asked the question I was terrified to ask. Was it meant to look accidental? One of the officers nodded slowly. That's usually the goal. That night, lying alone in the hospital room, I replayed everything. The drinks she poured, the pills she encouraged me to take, the way she watched me fall asleep, and suddenly all the small things lined up into something horrifyingly clear. This wasn't a moment of anger. This wasn't impulsive. It was planned, calculated, timed. And the realization hit me like a second collapse. This wasn't about a bad marriage. It wasn't about resentment or unhappiness. It was about money, about my will, my insurance, my estate. I wasn't her husband in that moment. I was a payout. As the machines hummed beside me, keeping me alive, one truth settled in my chest colder than fear. I wasn't supposed to wake up. And that's when I understood this wasn't about love. It was about inheritance. They discharged me quietly. No press,
No announcements, no visitors except the police and a nurse who looked at me like I was already a ghost. For my safety, they said. For clarity, I told myself. Clarity didn't come all at once. It crept in. The investigation didn't start with confrontation. It started with silence. I didn't call her. I didn't accuse her. I didn't ask why. Instead, I watched. From the hospital bed, I asked the officer assigned to my case a simple question. If someone planned this, what would they do next? He answered without hesitation. They'd assume you're already dead. That sentence changed everything. Because if she believed I wasn't coming back, then she'd stop pretending. The first thing we checked was paperwork. My estate attorney pulled records I hadn't looked at in years. Amendments, adjustments, changes made quietly, efficiently. Life insurance policies had been updated 3 months earlier, beneficiaries reaffirmed, emergency clauses activated, all in her favor. She hadn't just been curious about my will, she'd been preparing it. Then came the digital trail. Search histories recovered from our home network. At first glance, they looked innocent. Health questions, medication interactions. But then the pattern emerged. How long do sedatives stay in the system? What causes cardiac arrest without visible trauma? Can toxicology be mistaken for natural causes? I felt sick reading them, not because they were graphic, but because they were clinical. No emotion, no hesitation, just execution. There were messages, too. Not to me, to someone else. A number saved under a woman's name I didn't recognize. Short texts, efficient, cold. Timing matters. Make sure it doesn't look rushed. The payout only works if there's no suspicion.
That was the moment my heartbreak turned into something else. Clarity. This wasn't a woman acting out of desperation. This was someone who believed the outcome was guaranteed. The police traced the number. It belonged to a financial advisor, someone she'd met months earlier, someone who specialized in estate optimization, someone who knew exactly how deaths became assets, someone who benefited if she did. Everything aligned. Her sudden interest in my health, her encouragement to rest, her insistence on handling my medication. She wasn't nurturing me. She was managing the timeline. I asked to see her once, just once. The officers allowed it, controlled, monitored, recorded. She walked into the hospital room dressed in black, eyes red, voice trembling. She played the role perfectly. "Oh my God, I thought I lost you." I watched her closely. Not her words, her eyes. They weren't relieved. They were calculating. She asked careful questions. What did the doctors say? Are you going to be okay? Do they know what caused it? Not why it happened, just whether it worked. I answered vaguely. Let her believe the story she needed. After she left, the officer nodded slowly. She didn't ask a single emotional question, he said. That night, alone again, I finally let myself feel it. The grief, the loss, not of a marriage, but of a reality I thought was solid. I had loved her, trusted her, built a life assuming we were facing the world together. Instead, she had been standing behind me, measuring. The devastation didn't come from anger. It came from understanding how calmly she expected me to disappear, how easily she stepped into the role of widow, how ready she was to move on. But devastation doesn't last forever. Eventually, it sharpens. I stopped asking why. I started asking how. How much did she think she'd get? How soon did she plan to access it? Who else believed I was already gone? And that's when the final piece fell into place. She had already begun the process. Calls to insurers, meetings scheduled, documents drafted, all timed around a death that hadn't finished happening. She thought she'd already won. She thought the story was over. And that mistake, that premature confidence, saved my life. Surviving should have made me panic.
That's what people expect. Fear, rage, confrontation, a dramatic explosion of truth. But I didn't confront her. I disappeared. From the moment the doctors confirmed I would live, I understood something crucial. If she knew I was alive too soon, she'd adapt, and I couldn't afford that. So instead of reacting emotionally, I reacted strategically. The first move was legal. From my hospital bed, I contacted my attorney, not the one who handled our joint matters, but a specialist I trusted with absolute discretion. Within 48 hours, emergency protections were activated. Assets frozen, power of attorney revoked, beneficiary designations suspended pending investigation. Quietly. No notifications, no warnings. On paper, nothing had changed. In reality, everything had. Next came the financial lockdown. Accounts I rarely checked were suddenly secured, secondary access removed, alerts installed, every transaction monitored in real time. She could still see the wealth, she just couldn't touch it. Then came the authorities, not uniforms, not raids, professionals. They moved slowly, carefully, like surgeons, pulling records, interviewing the right people, mapping timelines, confirming motives. Every step was designed to do one thing: let her keep believing the story she had already written. The doctors helped. Official reports described my condition as critical but stable, recovery uncertain, outcome unclear. In other words, hopeful but unlikely. Exactly what she needed to hear. I stayed out of sight. No calls, no messages, no updates. And just like the officer predicted, she stopped pretending. The tone of her communication changed. Less concern, more logistics. She contacted insurers again, asking procedural questions. She rescheduled meetings just in case. She asked about timelines, hypothetically. Each move was documented. Each step tightened the net. I watched it all from a distance, emotionally detached in a way I never thought possible. This wasn't revenge. This was containment. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. Justice doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from preparation. Weeks passed. I recovered faster than expected, physically at least. Emotionally, I was already somewhere else. Someone who understood that survival wasn't the victory. Control was. Then came the moment she slipped. She tried to access a secured account, just once, just enough to confirm what she feared. The alert hit my phone immediately. She knew something was wrong. That's when the calls started. Concerned at first, then confused, then irritated. Why is this taking so long? Why can't I get answers? Why isn't anyone calling me back? I didn't answer. Because silence is powerful when someone realizes they've lost control. Finally, the authorities decided the timing was right. They arranged the reveal. Not dramatic, not public, just final. She was called in to clarify some paperwork. She walked in expecting cooperation. She walked out facing consequences. When she finally realized I was alive, truly alive, the shock wasn't loud. It was quiet, a stillness, the kind that happens when someone understands the game is over. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She asked one question: how? And for the first time, I spoke. I assumed I was gone, I said calmly, so you stopped hiding. That was it. No speeches, no anger, just facts. Because power doesn't raise its voice. Power waits. As the investigation moved forward, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because she was exposed, but because I no longer had to protect a lie. The lie that love guarantees safety. The lie that proximity equals loyalty. The lie that trust should be blind. I had survived the attempt on my life. But more importantly, I had survived the illusion that almost killed me. And as the doors closed behind her, one thought stayed with me. She believed money made me vulnerable. She never realized it gave me time. And when she finally realized I was alive, it was already too late.
The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded slowly, deliberately, the way truth does when it finally has room to breathe. There were legal consequences, marital consequences, financial consequences, but the first and most important outcome was simple. I was alive. The investigation moved forward without drama. Evidence spoke louder than emotion ever could. Messages, records, timelines, decisions that, when placed side by side, told a story no explanation could erase. The marriage ended quietly, not with shouting, not with closure conversations, not with apologies. Some things don't deserve a final argument. They deserve distance. Financially, the damage was contained because I survived long enough to act, because safeguards existed, even if they were activated later than they should have been. I rebuilt control piece by piece, understanding for the first time that wealth without protection is just vulnerability with a price tag. But the deepest consequences weren't legal or financial. They were internal. I had to sit with the truth that was uncomfortable and unavoidable. The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. I ignored questions that felt intrusive. I excused behavior that felt off. I confused familiarity with safety. Not because I was foolish, but because I was comfortable. And comfort is dangerous. It convinces you that effort is over, that vigilance is unnecessary, that love, once earned, doesn't need verification. Surviving stripped that illusion away. I realized something sobering. Love does not replace accountability. Ever. Not in marriage, not in business, not in family. If anything, closeness demands more transparency, not less.
I used to believe trust meant never asking questions. Now I understand it means being strong enough to ask them early. Protecting yourself legally doesn't mean you expect betrayal. It means you respect reality. Contracts aren't pessimistic. Boundaries aren't cold. Preparation isn't paranoia. They are forms of self-respect. Money taught me another hard lesson, too. It doesn't change people. It reveals them. It magnifies intention, accelerates behavior, removes excuses. What someone does when money enters the room tells you who they already were, not who they became. And when survival enters the equation, clarity follows. I no longer romanticize risk. I no longer equate silence with peace. I no longer confuse stability with safety. Because I learned that survival is sometimes the loudest truth you'll ever hear. It cuts through denial. It exposes performance. It demands honesty. I survived something that should have ended my life. And instead of making me bitter, it made me precise. With trust, with boundaries, with people. I walk differently now, not in fear, but in awareness. I ask better questions. I document what matters. I listen to my instincts when they whisper, instead of waiting until they scream. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all, staying alive isn't just about avoiding death. It's about choosing clarity over comfort, truth over illusion, preparation over blind faith. I don't measure wealth the same way anymore, not by numbers, not by assets, not by status. I measure it by autonomy, by safety, by the ability to wake up each day with agency intact. She planned to inherit my wealth by killing me, but surviving taught me the real value of staying alive. Thank you for watching. Every story here isn't just entertainment, it's a lesson. Betrayal, deception, and shocking truths can come from the people closest to us, but awareness, caution, and listening to your instincts can protect you. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss another shocking revelation. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a situation where trust was tested? We read every single one. Remember, truth may hurt, but it always sets you free. See you in the next story.